10 years. Wow. Seems like just yesterday, Joanne, that we were sitting in a hotel room in Virginia Beach, not knowing what the future held, and God spoke Washington Christian Life Center into existence. Then and there, it was only in our heart, but I think we knew from that moment forward that this was the church of destiny for our lives and a church that God was going to raise up here in the Washington area. Now, 10 years later, we come together to celebrate what God has done. Welcome to our 10th anniversary. Josh was 10, Jordan was 6, and Justin was a whopping 2. Boy, it seems like yesterday. A lot of time has passed. But I today can say with assurance that we wouldn't trade the last 10 years. It's been the most enjoyable time of our lives. God has added a family, a church family to us, and He's given us a team that I believe can enter the future. And so as we look back over these past 10 years, we do so most of all acknowledging God. God spoke this church supernaturally into existence. We give Him all the credit for it, and He sustained us along the way. Joanne, 10 years later, how do you feel about this?
Well, I have to say that the day that Frank Houston spoke the word over us in that meeting, things changed. The last 10 years have been totally different than anything we experienced before. It seemed like once that happened, it was like God was right on our shoulder, right at our backs, just confirming everything to us and letting us know that what we were doing was in His plan and was a part of His plan. The vision was there, it was clear, and it seems like we've just been moving forward ever since. Not that we haven't made mistakes, but God has been right there with us. So that has been really amazing to me.
I think the last 10 years, there's been some struggle in those 10 years, been some downs, been some times where we wondered, but I think through it all, there's been a sense that we've been carried along on eagle's wings. And I believe that's what God wants to do for His church. And so today we really have to give God all the credit for Washington Christian Life Center. And as we look back over these 10 years, I think when we were in that hotel room and we said, hey, if we're going to do this, God was speaking this church. It was in His heart. We believe from eternity it was in His heart. But as He revealed it to us, and then as Frank Houston from Australia confirmed that word, I think we decided then that we wanted to lead a church that we enjoyed being a part of. And I think I can speak for both of us and for Josh and for Jordan and for Justin. We love Washington Christian Life Center, and today we lead the way in celebrating these 10 years. September 1997. That's when it all started. Washington Christian Life Center really met as a revival center. You see, God had called this church into existence when Joanne and I were finishing up another ministry. We didn't know what was next, but God spoke this church into existence. The night after, we had made a very hard decision to leave the past and enter into the future. God brought a man from Australia. He actually brought 2 men from Australia in a matter of 2 weeks. The first was Frank Houston, who confirmed the launching of this new church. He told us that what we had decided to do was a hard thing, but the right thing. And that was to leave the old and launch into the new. And then Al Feary from Australia came, and he spoke a clinching word, a defining word for us. And from that moment forward, our church began to launch into what I would call an era of great revival. The first 2 years, we weren't really concerned about organization. We weren't concerned about church planning. It was just a great time of encountering God. You could have thought we were vagabonds. We were on Sully Field Circle in Chantilly. We were out at the storefront on Route 50. We were in the tent. Remember that one? We were at Chantilly High School. But all of those places had a signature that I believe followed this group of people that were meeting together. And that signature was God showed up in supernatural and dynamic proportions. I can think of those great worship services. I can think of those nights where we soaked in the presence of God. I remember those Georgian concerts. I remember Michael Shaw from New Orleans preaching. These were some awesome days, some awesome moments. I remember our sabbatical during that period. Tom Harmon was here. Plumman, we got to know him. I remember we met Plumman from Bulgaria in a tent. I could go on and on with the memories. Our band of people were small, but it was a convincing group of people that were sold out to the presence and purposes of God. We didn't know what the future held. Actually, during that time, though, God gave us a mission statement. I can remember Paul and Stephanie, Joanne and I, and a few other people in a room where we carved out this mission statement that we still use today on these large sheets of paper. And I'm not sure we quite knew what was happening then, but God was leading us and preparing the way for the emergence of a great church. I'm going to tell you, I wouldn't want to go back there, but I would never trade those moments because they were the supernatural origins of what was to come. It was indeed a time of great revival. God changed our lives. We experienced His presence in a way like we had never known it. We learned to depend on Him like we had never known it. And out of that, a church was formed.
The whole revival era for me was one of real refreshing. Praise and worship just went to a whole nother level, and just relating to God, feeling His love, the Father's love was something that I never experienced to that degree. And it really changed my life, and it was wonderful to see the impact that it had on other people's lives as well. So I think during that revival time that we call renewal, it was just a really special time, and I treasure the fact that I was able to be a part of something really fantastic.
Well, I remember a lot about in those early days of Washington Christian Life Center. We're in the midst of the revival, and a lot of people's lives were being changed. My wife Linda especially went through a lot of great healing during that time, and we had a real exciting time when we moved out of where we'd been in Sullyfield Circle, and we moved the church to 3 locations. We had part of it in a school, and part of it in a tent, and part of it in a storefront, and we had some great meetings. I remember especially great meetings in the storefront with Al Fury and George Banov and others, and I know that was a time for Linda and I. We made some really serious commitments to the kingdom, and God really stretched us financially. We made some decisions to step out way beyond our comfort level and trust God in great new ways, and He has richly blessed our lives since then, I know, as a result of the stepping out in faith that we did during that era.
Two years after starting our revival center, it's the fall of 1999. Joanne and I had come off of a great sabbatical where God had just worked in our lives. We are now back, ready to move forward. I knew then and there that God wanted to do something very impactful in this whole region. He wanted to plant a church. It was time not just to enjoy His presence, but to move toward His purposes. I remember Centerville. God's eye was leading us to Centerville. We thought of Centerville as being the center of this whole region. And I can remember that first organizational meeting where we declared the purposes of God. A lot of people were there because there was a lot of anticipation. What's going to happen next? And God was calling us to plant in Centerville. We moved to Mountain View School. Wow, what an incredible era we entered into. I would not trade anything for that period. It was difficult at first because not everybody could make the transition from being a kind of a non-structured revival center to being a church with purpose and destiny. But we knew that God had put this in our heart. It was the next step on the journey. And as we came to Centerville, came to Mountain View School, those Saturday nights, those Sunday mornings, the bread truck, as we hauled equipment and set up, and God was really with us. It was an incredible time. And then as the year 2000 rolled around, we really experienced what I call an oddity for a church. We broke the 100 barrier twice. We started the year with more than 100 people. Then we went down below 100 people as we were declaring our purposes, but we knew this was what God wanted. And then later in that year, we broke the 100 barrier again, and we started growing in the summer of 2002. It was during this time of planning that 3 very significant things happened that have a lot to do with our shape and our destiny. First of all, God brought into my life a man named Steve Kelly. He was the new pastor of what is now the Wave Church in Virginia Beach. Steve had been like a pastor and a mentor to Joanne and I during our sabbatical, and now he was right there with us, coaching us as we began to enter our future and began to really plant a church that we knew would have proportions of influence and prevailing influence here in Northern Virginia and the Washington region. And I remember Steve calling me one day and he said, "David, there are 3 people that I want to send to your church this year. 1 was Ed Trout, 2 was John Morgan, and 3 was a man named Gordon Gibbs." And enter Gordon Gibbs. What a man. An 80-year-old healing evangelist that God brought into my life. I never forget the first few times Gordon came. We were in Centerville High School. Wow. God just poured out His Spirit. He packed the place out. It was incredible what happened. Actually, Gordon was a fulfillment of a word that Al Fury had given me 2 years earlier when he said God was going to bring an old man into my life. Gordon really became like a father. He became a man that really was the apostolic father of Washington Christian Life Center.
And I'm sure the desire of your heart is to reach the optimum in God to which God has purposed in His heart for you to attain. And that's our desire. We're excited about it all, and we just know that what you're going to learn and what you're going to experience and what you're going to be taught is going to lift you up into the very heights of heaven.
Gordon believed in this vision. He believed that God was going to do great things. I think it was a couple years later, 2000 and maybe 2001, we decided to do a whole month of healing meetings. And it was during that month that over 100 churches showed up for these healing meetings in hotel rooms, in schoolhouses, wherever. And God began to give credibility to Washington Christian Life Center. God began to restore the credibility that we knew it would take to build a significant church. It was an incredible phenomenon. Gordon began to really speak faith over us. He began to say, "David, you can go for it." And today, as we celebrate our 10th anniversary, we give great honor and respect to a man that God used, Gordon Gibbs. Now, not only was Gordon brought to us during this church planning period, but God also brought another man, Pastor Wilma Franco and his wife Claudia. I'll never forget the first night we met. We ate at Ruby Tuesdays together. It really wasn't our first meeting, but the first meeting I knew about. Because when Ed Trout had been speaking at our church, Pastor Wilma had come. He was on the second row. And Ed had spoken a word to Wilma. Not only that he was going to have a future with me, not only was he going to have a destiny with me, but together we would have a destiny to the nations. God brought Pastor Wilma into our ministry, and in December of 2001, we planted the Spanish congregation. Pastor Wilma was the senior pastor. It was a new paradigm for how an Anglo and a Spanish church could work together. And to this day, that encounter started with a prophetic encounter, has been so influential in the unfolding vision of Washington Christian Life Center. And then it was also during that period that we stepped out in great faith and purchased the old Disney building in Gainesville. We called it the Life Center. It was an investment property. It became our offices. It was actually a place where we started some Saturday night outreach meetings. But mainly, it was a step of faith for us. It was a time where we had to trust God at a higher level than ever before. And as I look back on that period, had we not acquired the Life Center and really stepped out in faith, we wouldn't be ready to build here on Ballsford Road today. So what an incredible period. God did so many wonderful things. He began to add to our church, and Mountain View School served us incredibly well.
At Mountain View School, the relationships that were built with the custodians there and also with the staff at Mountain View School was one of the treasured things that I can remember. Out of that came our Lunch and Learn ministry to the pregnant and parenting teens of Mountain View School. It's an alternative education school, and we have just treasured our relationship with them, and that ministry has continued today even though we aren't at the school.
It was actually at the end of Mountain View School's tenure that God brought Pastor Steve Dawson. And I would say of the three men in that whole era, one was Gordon, two was Wilmer, and three was Pastor Steve. Pastor Steve had been a senior leader, a senior pastor, and he and Sharon amalgamated their ministry with ours, and that formed the foundation for what would later come in Manassas when we really began to move toward establishing the foundation of a prevailing church. Truly, that era, starting around 1999 in the fall and continuing to right around the end of 2003 going into 2004 were the most defining 4 years of our ministry. And I tell you, it was during that period that a prevailing church was planted here in the Washington region.
One of the aspects of the ministry at Washington Christian Life Center that has impressed me the most and blessed me the most is what we've called the cycle of congregational care. As a pastor and a member of the leadership team over the years, I've appreciated the commitment that Pastor David has had and the other leaders have had to make people feel warmly welcomed from the very first time they're visiting the church, through the process of getting them oriented to the church and assimilated into the life of the church, even to the point where they would be invited to be part of a small group ministry, being a part of a ministry team, and even worked with through difficult times, having folks come alongside them. This is all part of a cycle of care that's characterized CLC from the time that I've been a part of it. Frankly, as a partner, I've appreciated and have personally benefited from this cycle and from the care that characterizes the real heartbeat of this church.
During this period, after acquiring the Life Center, we started Training Center International. Wally Odom, who's been very instrumental in our church from day one, even before day one, God used him to help bring the revival that changed our lives and helped to launch our church. But now Wally had come back from Australia and he moved to Northern Virginia for a few months, and during this time helped us launch the training center. That training center still continues today. I remember those first classes out at the Life Center, and some of the great leaders and team players that we have in our church today were raised up during this great period in our life. Wally is another one of those guys, he and Gwen, that we want to say you've had such an incredible contribution to the progress of this vision that we call WCLC. As the church began to grow in Centerville, Pastor Steve and Sharon had joined with Joanne and I as our co-pastors, and we were experiencing great growth. God began to put it on our hearts to find a more permanent home. That began the search. And in February of 2004, we came to the Elks Lodge, the old historic hayloft here in Manassas. The last thing Gordon Gibbs ever did in the future of Washington Christian Life Center, or in the development of Washington Christian Life Center, was praying for us to acquire this Elks Lodge. We didn't purchase it, but this became our home. It became a place where our ministry could gain an establishment, where it could gain a prevailing influence in a community. And wow, from 2004 until now, it's been history. God has done so many great things. It was during this time that many of the ministries that have made such a difference, both here locally and globally, were raised up. The Washington International Network, the Making Life Better Foundation, the development of Training Center International, Designing Women, Vertical Youth, Real Men. I could go on and on. Our worship and creative arts. It's been incredible to see what God has done. Remember those age band pastoral groups? Now the area pastoring that we have, all of that got its foundation during this period here at the Elks Lodge. It was also during this period that we purchased the land at 11404 Ballsford Road. And now we are looking toward our future because of the great growth that has occurred here. I believe this period from 2004 until today has been a time where an established church was raised up. A church that's going to be here for the generations. A church that's going to have a legacy. It was during this time that God really began to formalize the team. I remember Sean coming from Australia because God told him to come and to help not just his uncle, but to help the kingdom of God in Northern Virginia. Sean met Jenny, who God had sent to us. They got married, and now they are a vital part of the team. I think about the ordinations. Jack and Sally, Jeremiah. I think about John and Natalia's marriage. Think about this entire team that God has brought together, really from around the world. I can't call everyone by name, but I look at the formation of the ministry team that God has given me to be one of the essential keys, not just to our future, but also to us being where we are today. We are a healthy church. We are a prevailing church because during this period, since 2004, God has just been establishing, adding, and today we look to our future knowing that we have a prevailing church that has celebrated 10 years together.
God has been so faithful to Washington CLC and Pastor David and Joanne over the past decade, and it has been so neat to be part of it and to watch it all happen. I mean, I look at all the miraculous real estate deals that have taken place and how God has really built a team of pastors and staff that surround Pastor David and Joanne, and they always come right at the time that Pastor and Joanne need them.
It was during this time that our Vision Conference became a defining event for our church. Over the past several years, people from all over the world have come. And that's because we have gone. We've experienced some of the great ministry of the body of Christ. David Evans, Phil Driscoll, Reuben Morgan coming for a concert. Wow, all of these were just highlight moments. Our Vision Conference each year, I believe, has influenced the world for the glory of God. And last but not least during this period, God brought somebody that didn't leave after the conference ended. And that was Russell Fraga. God supernaturally brought Russell and Chris and Kim and Alana and even Michelle for a part of this time to us. And they now become, I believe, yet another defining moment in the unfolding vision of Washington Christian Life Center.
We love this church for a whole bunch of reasons. We came here because we feel like we have genuine friends in David and Joanne here, and we discovered that we have a lot more real friends here. It's a truly Christian church, and that's what we love about it.
We spoke about God bringing Gordon for a season. We've talked about God attaching Pastor Wilma and then Pastor Steve. Well, I would say right up there, God brought Russell Fraga to us as our worship pastor, really as a senior associate with me, and together now we are ready to enter into the future. Well, the church has been a revival center. The church has been a plant in this region. Now the church is prevailing, and we get ready to reach out and really affect the region. But when it all comes down to it, the church is people. People make up the church. And I'm going to tell you, God has blessed us throughout the 10 years with some of the greatest partners, some of the greatest men and women and young people who have joined with us to make a great difference in our community. It's people that make up Washington Christian Life Center. Some of those people have been here from the beginning.
Being at Washington CLC from the beginning means a couple of major things for me. First of all, my children have grown up with the knowledge of Jesus Christ and the knowledge of the kingdom of God, and they're having fun. It's not boring, it's exciting. The second thing is that our leaders, David and Joanne, lead through prayer and the power of the Holy Spirit, and they base everything on the principles of God, of God's Word, and the promises of God. And to me, that's a winning combination.
Some of those people have been saved along the way.
Being part of the church and being saved in the church has been awesome for me. I've grown in leaps and bounds in my relationship with Christ and in knowing who God is in my life.
Some of those people have testimonies of great transformation.
I'm one of the ones who have been here from the beginning. And I came here a very broken woman, mind, body, and spirit. I was just broken. I had lost my whole family. It was probably the hardest time in my life. But this church, people here would come and get me. They would bring me up here in a wheelchair and lay me on a mat. And I got delivered from bone cancer. And the love in this church just made me whole again. And this church is my family.
There are many others who've come and gone, and yet their influence is dear to us, and we remember them on this day. There are some who've been born during these 10 years. And they're going to grow up with great destiny to make this church even greater.
And just seeing the church grow from just from place to place to place has allowed me to see that, one, that Pastor David and Joanne have shown that they are constant and that they're full of love and that they are wise. And those are the types of things that I want to emulate in my life, and that's what I would take with me.
There are others who've practically cut their teeth on the pews. Well, we don't really have pews, but these are people who've grown up in this ministry, and I believe are living icons of WCLC.
As I've grown up in CLC, Sundays are something that I look forward to. They're fun and exciting. It's not an obligation at all. And I'm just really excited to see how much the church has grown, and I'm excited to see where it's headed in the future.
Both my parents, my mom and my dad, have really modeled for me how to be an all-around great person.
I was in KLC for many years, and then once I graduated, I had the opportunity to be a leader in KLC and lead the kids, so that was really cool, just growing up and watching things develop.
And then there are people who've just been added, people who've just come our way and who are excited to join us as we enter our future.
I'm excited. I'm a new person here, and never in my life as a Christian have I ever felt the kind of anticipation that I feel right now.
And together, all of these friends and partners make up this incredible miracle that we know as Washington Christian Life Center. As we conclude 10 years today, we stand on the brink of a whole new era for our church. We're entering a whole new year, a whole new season. We're calling this From This Day Forward. And I believe from this day forward holds some values and some vision that have been with us from the beginning. Our mission statement has never changed. Our vision is still to be a prevailing church. I believe we'll see one church in multiple locations. We've already begun to see that in western Loudoun County. And we know that what we're doing here in Manassas is a prototype of what we'll do elsewhere. This is a season where we're looking to our building for life to provide even a more permanent home, the next stop along the way. We believe this will be the first campus of many here in the Washington region. Our influence grows around the world. The Washington International Network, both globally and locally through the Making Life Better Foundation, continue to touch more and more lives. And together, we know the best is yet to come.
We have an awesome destiny. It's not just It's not just a future, it's a destiny. A destiny is a greater thing than a future, because a future is what happens, to come. Destiny is what God is calling us to. And I believe that we have a great destiny. There are souls to reach, people for us to reach. There's a community to help. There's worship for us to bring. And we do have a great destiny. So the first 10 years, I know have been awesome. But I can tell you that the next year, the next 5 years, the next 10 years, and on into the future, we have a great destiny to walk into. So let's celebrate.
10 long but short years, Joanne. And here we are, anticipating our future. We really do believe the best is yet to come. We want to thank each and every one of you who have partnered with us. Those of you who've spoken an encouraging word. Those of you who've stood with us in the trenches. Those who stood with us even in times when we were absent for a short season. And now together, I believe we enter our future. More than our future, we enter our destiny. And today, as we close this 10th anniversary look back over the past 10 years, our eyes are really on the future, on the harvest, on what God has in store. And all I can say is the best is yet to come.